come now to Movie Spotlight, our Friday feature where our film critics give their recommendations on what new films to watch this weekend here in Korea, whether at the movie theatre or at home. So without further ado, let's bring them in now. First we have Jason Bechervaise to my right. Jason, hello, it's good to see you.
Hey Jang, it's great to be back here after a bit of respite
yes.
away from the studio.
It's great to have you back. It sounds like you didn't want to be here.
No, I wanted to be here. Actually, I was really keen to get back here and talk about movies.
Sure, we
and
are.
to see you, Django, and of course.
Well, thank you.
Darcy, yeah.
Well, we are glad to have you back. And to my left, we have Darcy Paquet with us this week as well. Darcy, hello to you too.
Hi, good to be here.
Okay, this week we've got two local releases, and we start with your recommendation this week, Jason. It's actually a streaming release. It is the Netflix dystopian film Badland Hunters. The Korean title is Hwangya, which means the wilderness, or I guess Badlands. It stars Ma Dong-suk, also known as Don Lee. Jason, can you tell us more about this film? It's connected to the disaster survival film Concrete Utopia that was released last summer, right?
Well, yes and no is the answer to that question. And I've been following this kind of these movies. There's also a series because I wrote a chapter on the studios, and these films were financed and produced by Lotte Culture Works. And so there's Concrete Utopia that was released in the summer. It was quite well received. It didn't perform as well as I think people expected it to within the studio, but it's one of my favorite films from last year. But I think that spooked some of the investors behind it. What I would say is a kind of spin-off, I suppose. Basically what happened was when this film was announced, it was actually, because I remember reading the articles, it was described as a sequel. But the directors had to kind of navigate his way through these presses, because I think there are some legal issues, because it's now of course on Netflix, and Netflix, when they buy a film, they want the copyright and all the rest of it, so it can't be a sequel is what I assume. So basically this movie is directed by Ha Myung-hwan. He is an art director. He's worked on films such as Peninsula, and you can see the similar kind of aesthetic from that film. Also the Roundup 3, and also he's directing. I didn't know this. He's directing the next Roundup film, Punishment. Now these are the movies, of course, starring Ma Dong-suk.
It's going to Berlin.
And it's going to Berlin, so that's encouraging. I don't think they would have programmed to Turkey, because I think the general consensus was the third film of the series was a disappointment. I think there's a connection there, of course, to Ma Dong-suk. So this film stars and is produced by Ma Dong-suk, and basically, in a way, it feels very similar to Concrete Utopia. Begins as this earthquake completely decimates Seoul, and much of the film kind of feels like much of the film is set in this apartment complex akin to Concrete Utopia, and is actually shot in the same place, so they're able to actually keep the budget down, or so I heard. But it's also somewhat different. It focuses on a group of hunters led by Ma Dong-suk's Namsan, that's his character's name, who protects a small community from thugs and these kind of mutant creatures. After basically Seoul turns into this kind of dystopian landscape. And we have a young woman who is lured into an apartment complex. She's played by No Jong-wi, and where this doctor is conducting these awful experiments, turning humans into mutants. All this kind of stuff we've seen before, right? And so he's trying to keep his daughter alive, who's kind of, her heart is still beating in his lab. It's kind of freaky.
So this is the doctor?
This is the doctor.
Okay.
We're doctor's daughter, yeah. But yeah,
Sure.
So that, the plot itself very simple. It was launched on Netflix last week, and it's doing pretty well on there.
Okay, so it was meant to be a sequel to Concrete Utopia, or at least a spin-off, but it's no longer
something,
officially connected.
It's veered off somewhat.
Instead of being released in theatres, it's being released online instead of being just a simple post-apocalyptic survival movie. There are horror elements as well now with zombies and mutants, it sounds like. So it's an interesting scenario. Then, Jason, what do you think of it? And is it as good as Concrete Utopia? You said you liked it.
Yeah, it's not as good as Concrete Utopia. And actually, if I'm brutally honest, or if I am honest, they have the two movies that we're talking about today. I think Darcy's film is Darcy's recommendation. It is better. That being said, though, I've taught classes on kind of Korean dystopia, so I found this film quite fascinating. It's very derivative in a sense, but there's references to lots of Korean films that have preceded it. There's a blatant reference or nod to the host at the beginning, and clear connections to Snowpiercer, Korea's first kind of successful global project, and the apartment complex, which is an interesting setting for a number of Korean films. Of course, Bong Joon-ho's Barking Dogs Never Bite, Happy End, films like Hide and Seek, Hashtag Alive, and of course Concrete Utopia. And we got Ma Dong-suk's kind of killer punch. That's his persona now, right? That's where he finds success. Of course in the Roundup films, but here as well, he literally just punches all these thugs, and they just literally get knocked out or die. And it comes at an interesting time for the industry, because you've got films that were destined for theatres that are now being released online, or films that didn't do well in theatres, and 2 months later they find themselves on streaming platforms. So which is great for international viewers, because they get to see a lot of Korean content. There's so much out there, but what does it mean for the Korean theatrical landscape? So which feels somewhat dystopian. So I just as someone who's obsessed with Korean films, I found this quite interesting.
Sure.
But I can see how people just find it I don't know, too violent. I mean, the netizen score that I saw was pretty low.
Okay.
And so I could see why in theaters this would completely bomb. It's just, it's not a film that I would, that's particularly accessible, I think, to the mainstream, put it that way. But for a streaming service like Netflix, I can see why they got hold of it, because of course they finance so much Netflix content.
And the film has been doing well, I understand. It's topped the global Netflix chart for non-English language films, so it does seem to be appealing to international viewers. Darcy, what did you think? Did you catch it? Jason, I guess, has had a lukewarm reaction to the film.
Yeah, to me, this kind of film is sort of hard to review in some ways, because, in one sense, all the parts fit together, and, they produce it at a decent quality and everything else. But it does, it does feel very familiar. There's not a lot that you haven't seen in other Korean films already. And so it's sort of like, taking the stuff that you liked from other films and putting them together, adding Ma Dong-suk. It felt very familiar. It's the kind of film that I think, after a month or two, you're going to kind of forget that you saw it, or it's going to swim in your memory with all the other stuff that you've seen. As you're watching it from moment to moment, it keeps your attention. It's and it's decently executed. But yeah, it's a hard film for me to get excited about, I guess.
Right. I guess it's disappointing as well, especially considering that Concrete Utopia felt far more original as well.
Yeah, Concrete Utopia was it was really unusual, and so the very idea of a spin-off of that, unless you have the same people involved, it's going to feel like something very different.
When I was talking about Concrete Utopia on the show, I mentioned how actually it seemed to be influenced by the kind of the content found on streaming platforms, and so in a sense, I guess it's
full circle.
It's full circle. It's not ironic that the sequel, or whatever it is, finds its way onto Netflix.
Okay, so that was Badland Hunters. Let's continue on now to our second film, one that Jason is perhaps more excited about.
Yeah.
This is Darcy's recommendation, though. It is a new comedy drama starring Lamidan. Starring Lamidan. It's called Citizen of a Kind, or 시민덕희 in Korean, which translates to Citizen Dokhi. And Darcy, I understand that it's a film that's based on a true story.
It is, and as with all cases where you take a true story and then you adapt it into a feature film, they tweak it here and there to make it more dramatic. But despite that, it is quite a surprising true story. And so basically, it's based on this incident from 2016 in which, a woman lost over 30 million won in a voice phishing scheme, and certainly, that kind of thing is not unique. And in the film we see that this is affecting a lot of different people, but, she was really struggling financially even before this incident took place. And so she finds herself really kind of with her back against the wall. And then suddenly, this guy who ripped her off calls her back, and, she's furious, and but the man kind of begs her to listen, and he says, he wants to give her some information that will help the police to come and shut this place down. He says, I'm here against my will. If I give you this information, can you forward it to the police? Can you arrange, and somehow, in a way, he's kind of asking her to save him. And, of course, she's not really sure whether to believe him or not, or what the issue is, but, she starts to follow this clue that he gives her, and that leads her eventually to China, because, this operation is based in China, even though it's overseen by this kind of Korean gang. And, the film, as we watch it, we go back and forth between her perspective. And there's also this Korean man who's been abducted in China and who's kind of forced to work for this thing. And yeah, I mean, it's a good setup. It pulls you in quite quickly.
Right.
It does, yeah.
I mean, I can't believe it's based on a real life incident.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It does give you a lot of respect for the people involved, because they were taking real serious risks in kind of chasing this down on both sides, both on her part and on the part of this person, kind of feeding her these tips.
So it's quite a gripping setup. What do you think of the film then, Darcy? This is also meant to be a comedy as well, though, right? Well,
it's funny because, I mean, the lead actor is Lam Yiran, and she is known very much as a comic actor. And so before I knew anything about the film, all I knew was kind of like the title and the main cast, and I just assumed it was a comedy because Lam Yiran is always kind of, headlining comedies. But I think this is a really good example of how, actors who are good at comedy can really do other kinds of acting quite well. It's just that people rarely give them the chance. And of course, Song Kang-ho used to be typecast as a comic actor, and it took somebody with some imagination to put him into a role like JSA. And she's really, really good. She clearly has enough acting skills to carry this film and to really pull you into it. But the whole cast is really good. I mean, Kong Myung is quite good as her counterpart. But then there are all these other actors who, play these various roles within the story. We have, Yum Hye-ran, who's just an incredible actress, Jang Yun-ju, Park Byung-eun. So, yeah, it's really well done. And then the director does seem to be quite talented. This is her second film. She previously debuted with an independent film called Second Life, Sunny Wa Silgi, which screened at BIFF, went to a bunch of international film festivals, and then she also made a short film earlier in her career, which screened at Cannes. So, yeah, it's exciting to see such a well-made film from a director who's still kind of establishing herself. And it was much better than I really had any reason to expect.
Indeed. I saw the trailer as well, and perhaps I was expecting something different, but it sounds like it is quite a interesting work. Jason, you said you liked it as well.
Yeah, no, it's just a lot of fun. It's part of a kind of growing body of work, focusing on, voice phishing. We saw Voice a couple of years ago. There was Unlocked as well, the Netflix film, and so this is a real problem. That's why I don't answer phone calls from numbers I don't know.
Like many of us in Korea.
Yeah,
really,
exactly.
Nowadays,
It's very familiar. But yeah, as Darcy mentioned, it's really engrossing, great leading performance. It's really well made, it's really well shot in China as well. And I think what I liked about it as well, it just focuses on this particular female character, and you have this team of, these ajumas, and they are just adorable. They really are adorable, and you're rooting for them until the end. And there's this great climatic sequence which kind of evokes the Outlaws in a weird kind of way, and the way she faces the kind of the antagonist at the end, it's just really. It's just really cathartic, I think is the word I'm looking for, it's a really engaging film. Lots of fun. It's dealing with an issue that is clearly quite disturbing, But it's by far the best of the the voice phishing films that I've seen, and it's doing pretty well in theaters, and rightly so. And it was also reminiscent of is it Miss and Mrs. Cops?
Oh yeah.
Where Eminem plays a cop in that film, and the cops here are just useless. Like
a lot of
like
screen
so,
cops, yes.
Moral support, but not much else.
I mean, they come round, but it takes them a while.
Well, it sounds fantastic. So once again, it's called Citizen of a Kind. It's out now here in theatres in Korea. That's where we're going to leave it. Jason, Darcy, thank you for your reviews as always, and we'll catch you next time.
Yeah, take care.
Yeah, see you next time.